In this video, we will take the Mindfulness ambient and evolving sound in Ableton Live 11 Lite and apply a 1-5-1-4 turnaround using inversions to create a simple song. Welcome to Ableton Live 11 Lite. This is a stripped down, simplified version of Ableton, which means you have fewer instruments and fewer tracks, but it often comes bundled with music interfaces, so more people might have access to it. We're going to create a simple song here using the Mindfulness sound. But to begin, we'll remove these two audio tracks. So this is the session view. This is one of two views in Ableton, but don't be too worried about that for now. In order to remove these audio tracks, we right-click, select Delete. Our sound today is called Mindfulness, and it's under the Ambient and Evolving section. So in the top left-hand corner, we're under the Sounds category, Ambient and Evolving, and here's Mindfulness. So let's see how that sounds. We can mute by clicking on the headphones and enable. In order to use this sound, we need to apply it to a track. You can see here that each track has different clips on it. So we'll use the first track and the top clip. So left click and drag Mindfulness up and then let go, and that applies that sound to that track. Here's the Mindfulness sound down here. We're leaving it with all the defaults as we're just going through the sounds to hear what they sound like in default settings to make your life as easy as possible. Okay, so in order to create some sounds, we need some MIDI data. So if you double click on the clip, brings up the MIDI editor. If you click this headphone icon and click on the piano roll, we can preview the sound. We're going to use a 4-bar clip. So here where it says length, if you click and drag up, we can create 4 bars here. We're going to use a 1-5-1-4 turnaround in the key of G major. Now, if you're confused by some of these terms, then check out our video on the 1-4-5 turnaround, and that should explain what we're talking about here initially. So in order to get G major, we can click on Scale and select G. And the notes of G major are highlighted here in the MIDI editor. So with these ambient sounds, if you create a chord, it's often difficult to hear the whole chord. It only plays a single note. So what we're going to do is just play the bass notes from each chord, and that should allow us to create some sort of song. Our chord progression is 1-5-1-4. So in the key of G major, the 1 chord is G, the 5 chord is D, and the 4 chord is C. So we'll start with the 1 chord, which is G, and the lowest note. So we just want a G note sustained for a bar. So we're going to scroll down here to a lower octave. We'll use G2. So to create the note, you double click. That creates a note at the default length, which is 1/16. Then when this handle comes up, you left click and drag. Okay, and that's a G note sustained for a bar. Our second chord is the 5 chord, which is D. So we'll go to D. Same again. Now we go back to G. And finally we go to C. Okay, so that's 1-5-1-4 in its basic form. Let's see how that sounds. So we come up here and click on the play icon. Okay, I can see that needs to change there. As mentioned earlier though, we're going to use inversions. So inversion is where you take the same notes as the major chord, but rather than having the root note as the lowest note, you use one of the other notes in the chord. So a first inversion uses the third note in the chord, and a second inversion uses the fifth note in the chord as the lowest note. So as we're only using the bass notes or the lowest notes here, we can experiment with inversions to change how our chord progression or bass line looks. If you need some help with inversions, then check out our video on using inversions in a 1-4-5 chord progression. So the effect I want to create here is a rising bass line. So as you can see at the moment, we start at G, we go up to D, come back to G, up to C. What I want to do is start at G and gradually rise throughout the turnaround. We'll keep the first chord as G major standard. The second chord is a 5 chord, which is D. That has the notes D, F sharp and A. So what we'll do is if we change that into a second inversion, the lowest note becomes A. So then we can bring this down to A and it just steps up from the first G. So if we left click and highlight, you can click and drag down, or on your keyboard press the down arrow. And that takes us to A. So we've gone from G to A, we've gone from the 1 chord to the second inversion 5 chord. Okay, then we go back to G in the third bar, but we want to rise again from A, so we want something higher. So the G chord is made up of the notes G, B and D. Well, the next note along from A in this scale is B. So if we use a first inversion of the 1 chord, we can change this note to B. So same again, click, we'll drag up, and that goes to B. So you can see now we're creating a stepped bass line. The final chord is C, which is the 4 chord. Now the 4 chord has the notes C, E and G in it, so we could come back up or back down. But actually the standard C chord, root note C, continues our step bass line. So I'm quite happy with that. So let's see how it sounds now we've made our changes with our inversions. You can hear that rising up. And what we'll do is when we create the melody, we'll fill in using the other chord notes. It will start to imply the full chords, even though we're only playing the bass notes here. Before we move on to the melody, I will pan this track to the left slightly to provide some separation. So if you come here to the track pan, left click and drag down, it will move to the left. That'll do, 19 left for now. Okay, so now we want to move on to the melody. Same process. We left click and drag to the clip at the top. Mindfulness sound is loaded. Double click. G major is already loaded. We'll change the length to 4. And before I begin, I'll pan this one to the right. So with starting a melody, a good place to start is the root note of the chord. We're only going to use the chord notes in this melody. If you want some help with this, check out our simple melody guide using 1-4-5 chord notes. That should help you, but it's a very straightforward process. So the first chord was a G chord, standard G chord. If you remember, our bass notes were around G2, so we'll do this in a higher register here, G3 to G4. So our chord progression rose in the bass. So maybe it'll be interesting to have the melody descending in the opposite direction and see how that sounds. So we want to start with G. So we'll start up in G4. You can use this handle to edit the note length. You can click and drag to move notes around. And the notes in the one chord are G, B, and D. As you're editing your notes, you can have the notes playing. So if we click here, it will loop around the notes. So the second chord is the second inversion of 5 chord, a D. That uses D, F sharp and A, so we can carry over this common D note into the second bar if we want. Remember, we've got the A note playing in the second bar because it's the second inversion. But we're missing the F sharp. Okay, and then in the third bar, we're going back to the one chord, but the first inversion. So B is playing. I'll copy the same rhythm from the first bar here. And the final chord is 4, which is C, so that has the notes C, E and G. As I said, I wanted to end lower, so we'll end on the lower G. Okay, let's stop that there. Let's play the whole thing together so we can see what that sounds like. Click on the master play here. Okay, that's not too bad. You can hear our rising bass line in the harmony. And the melody does go up and down, but it comes down at the end in a counterpoint to the harmony rising. So this has been one of the more successful ambient sounds. Sometimes it can all become washed out and you can't discern any melody. So this has worked quite well. I'll end that here. Thanks for watching. You can now understand the mindfulness, ambient and evolving sound in Ableton Live 11 Lite. Please like and subscribe for more songwriting content from Songwriting Explained. If you'd like another Ableton tutorial, there's a playlist on screen for you now.